Welcome one and all. This is the Ancient Journey. On today's journey, the toxic woman. But before we get started, don't forget, if you enjoy the video, please give us a like and a share and subscribe. And don't forget to turn on those notifications. And if there's a story out there that you'd like to see us turn into a video, drop it in the comments section down below. Now, let's get started. Gloria Ramirez is a volunteer at a local elementary school in Riverside, California. She's settled in for the night with her 2 children and her boyfriend Johnny when something starts to not feel right. Gloria's been undergoing treatment for cervical cancer for the last 6 weeks, and she's starting to feel the nausea associated with the treatment. She starts vomiting, and soon Gloria starts to have trouble breathing. Ramirez's boyfriend calls an ambulance at 8 p.m. The ambulance gets Gloria to the hospital by 8:15. By the time Gloria arrives at the hospital, she's taken a drastic turn for the worse. She arrives at the Riverside Community Hospital delirious and with a heart rate so low that it's barely keeping her alive. She lets out a series of irregular deep gasps that stop altogether only to start over, a telltale sign to doctors that Gloria's heart is failing. The staff at the hospital begins normal procedures, injecting Gloria with sedatives and medication to keep her heart beating, but those steps only seem to make things worse. Doctors in the ER soon see that their last resort is a defibrillator. They'll try to shock Gloria's heart back into rhythm. As they apply the paddles to Gloria's body, and the current arcs between them, things in the emergency room suddenly go the slightest bit insane. As soon as Gloria is shocked, hospital staff see an oily sheen covering her body. Doctors and nurses close to Gloria pick up a strange smell of garlic emanating from her mouth. Susan Kane, a nurse on duty responsible for drawing blood from Gloria, notices that Gloria's blood has the heavy stench of ammonia coming from it. Suddenly, Susan crashes to the floor. She's actually fainted from how strong the odor is. Dr. Julie Gorczynski steps in and takes over for the nurse, but also faints when she holds the sample of Gloria's blood too close to her face and also breathes in the noxious ammonia odor. Several more team members also grow faint. Doctors and nurses who became ill later said when they looked at the blood vial from Gloria, her blood contained manila-colored crystals floating in it. As chaos is unfolding around them, one doctor finally decides that enough is enough. There are now 23 medical personnel who have fallen ill in the ER, 5 of whom will need to be hospitalized before the event is over. The doctor orders the emergency room evacuated. Gloria Ramirez dies at 8:50 p.m. after less than an hour being treated in the emergency room. Out of the 37 people in the emergency room, 23 suffered lightheadedness and nausea. Dr. Gorczynski was kept in the hospital for weeks. The exposure of Gloria's blood so close to her face leaves her with liver damage, a crippled pancreas, breathing problems, and death of bone tissue in her knees. Gloria's body is placed in a separate room and is later sealed in double plastic bags in an airtight container. The county health department is called in, as well as California's Department of Health and Human Services. Their questions of the hospital staff result in some dramatic findings. Those staff who had worked within 2 feet of Gloria or had handled any of her intravenous lines had presented severe symptoms, including loss of consciousness, muscle spasms, and shortness of breath. The questions also find that those affected were mainly women, and all workers had normal blood tests after the exposure. California's Department of Health and Human Services chalks the entire event up as a simple case of mass hysteria by the hospital staff. An investigative team enters the ER at 11 p.m. and fails to find any evidence of a toxin or biohazard that would have caused the blackouts or health issues of the staff. A sealed room is constructed to hold Gloria's remains, and her autopsy by the county coroner finds nothing of interest. 2 months after her death, Gloria's body is released for an independent autopsy and her burial. Shockingly, the pathologist hired by the Ramirez family receives Gloria's body from the state in terrible condition. She'd been stored at an improper temperature, and Gloria's body is badly decomposed. Gloria's heart is missing from her body, and the rest of her internal organs are badly contaminated. The independent autopsy is inconclusive, and Gloria is buried at Olivewood Memorial Park in Riverside, her family still left in the dark as to her cause of death. While the Ramirez family is left with no explanation of Gloria's death, the county coroner has sent tissue and blood samples to the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory for further analysis. In those samples, Livermore Labs discover high levels of DMSO, a solvent used as a degreaser and a home remedy for pain. Those who use DMSO report that it causes a garlicky taste in the mouth, even if it is not ingested. DMSO also has an oily or greasy appearance. The scientists at Livermore guessed that DMSO was being used by Gloria to relieve the pain she was having from her cancer and her cancer treatments. As the DMSO gathered in Gloria's system, it attacked her kidneys, causing her to fall ill and requiring the visit to the ER. As oxygen is administered to Gloria, it combines in a chemical reaction with the DMSO to form dimethylsulfone, which is known to crystallize at room temperature, possibly explaining the manila-colored flakes witnessed in her blood draw. The electric shocks given during defibrillation would have also converted the DMSO into dimethyl sulfate, a highly toxic but colorless gas. However, this theory has come under much scrutiny through the years. The reactions described by Livermore could never be reproduced in a lab setting, and while the staff who fell ill complained of the stench of ammonia, the reactions described by Livermore create a gas with a faint odor of onions. Also, the symptoms of the staff are not consistent with exposures to dimethyl sulfate. The report has many detractors, and another theory comes to light. Riverside, California in 1994 is one of the largest distribution areas for methamphetamine in the country. 2 of the chemicals used in the production of methamphetamine are anhydrous ammonia and methylamine, a derivative of ammonia. The theory presented was that the hospital workers, who could have been involved in the production of methamphetamine, had been using IV bags to smuggle these chemicals in and out of the hospital, and one of those bags could have been given to Gloria by accident. So is this just a case of mass hysteria? Dr. Gorczynski, who spent time in the ICU after the incident, says no, and her illnesses are clearly real. Can you believe the Livermore theory that staff accidentally turned a degreaser into a poisonous gas despite being unable to replicate the event in a lab? Or was this the case of the worst kind of mix-up, where Gloria received an IV full of poison? The local officials in the matter have closed the case on Gloria, taking over 10 weeks to issue a statement that she died of heart and kidney failure brought on by her cervical cancer. In other words, they took over 10 weeks to issue a statement that Gloria died of natural causes. But the chaotic scene in the ER, where Gloria's blood emitted a toxic cloud that night, seems anything but natural. Thanks for watching, and thanks for sharing the journey.